The clock has just struck midnight. October is here, the spooky season is upon us, and it is officially Preptober. Full disclosure, I don't have any plans for this video. I really don't know what I even intend it to be, but I just wanted to talk about my writing, so that's what I'm gonna do. This is gonna be the first time that I'm like legitimately doing Preptober, because pretty much every time I've done NaNoWriMo full force in the past, it's been kind of a spur of the moment, last minute decision, like within the few days before NaNoWriMo and sometimes on the day of. But over the past few months, I have been trying to focus more on my writing and trying to get myself into a better writing routine. And so I think that doing Preptober will really help me to get into NaNoWriMo. So let's start with what I've been doing in terms of writing recently. Back in July was when I really started getting in a good creative mind space, and I wanted to harness that into trying to develop a new story. And there was a little spark of an idea that I'd had for quite a while that I wanted to try to develop, and it wasn't ready to be written for Camp NaNoWriMo, and I didn't really have anything ready to write for Camp NaNoWriMo, so I tried to devote July to developing this idea. Per usual, I wasn't great with the follow through. For the first 2 weeks of the month, I think I was doing it pretty consistently and making some good progress, but I got a little stuck when it came with the characters, and I just kind of petered off and eventually gave up. Not gave up on the story altogether or anything, but I just stopped working on it. And then in August, I kind of just decided that I needed some sort of outward motivation to get words on the page, to get myself writing, even if it wasn't on a major project. So I ended up signing up on Reedsy, which has these weekly writing contests where basically we're given a prompt and we're given a week to write a short story that fits that prompt, and then people give feedback and there's a winner, etc. I really wanted that outward motivation of having to write to a deadline and having to think outside the box because I was only given certain prompts, and especially getting feedback from other writers because I wasn't really feeling super confident in my writing. Still not. So far, I've only submitted 2 stories, but I've gotten pretty good feedback on both of them, and I've really enjoyed being on the website. I'll link my profile down in the description if you'd like to go check it out and read my stories. Personally, my favorite of the 2 is New York City or Perhaps Nowhere 3 a.m. That's the one that I feel is the most me, I guess. It was actually a short story that I had the idea for and was already working on prior to being on Reedsy, but it just fit the prompt too well, and I really needed a deadline to get it actually finished and written. And those short stories are basically what I've been doing recently. I'm currently working on a 3rd story to put up on Reedsy in a few days, so that one will probably already be posted by the time this video is. But obviously, Preptober is not about short stories, it's about preparing for NaNoWriMo, where I'm going to attempt to write a 50,000 word draft, or at least 50,000 words of a draft, because no draft I'm ever gonna write is gonna be only 50,000 words. So my first task is to figure out which project I want to prep for NaNoWriMo, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think I know which direction I'm going in. I've kind of had 3 projects in the forefront of my mind recently. Firstly is Flirting with Fame, which I've written for NaNoWriMo twice and won NaNoWriMo with twice. Secondly is a project that I think I was talking about kind of around this time last year, which I've been referring to as GarageBand. And third is that new project that I was trying to prep in July. I do have a working title for it that I've been using, but I don't want to use it on here, and I'm not sure what to call it. So the 3rd project. So of those 3, honestly, I don't want to do Flirting with Fame for another NaNoWriMo. I've already done it for 2. That's enough. Of the other 2, I would really love to do the new 3rd project, but I'm kind of worried that October is not enough time to prep it because of what happened in July, because I got stuck on the characters and I just couldn't ever really get to the point where I was actually coming up with a plot. So therefore, at the moment, I'm currently leaning toward GarageBand. I don't feel super confident in that. If it's not GarageBand, I'm gonna go for the 3rd project. I'm just torn, and I really should have a decision made already because Preptober is upon us. But honestly, October snuck up on me this year. I did not realize that today was gonna be October until like 10 minutes before midnight. Honestly, at this point, I just never know what the date is. So when I saw September 30th, I was like, oh no, Preptober's here. So yeah, it just really snuck up on me. And again, I have started NaNoWriMo on a whim on day 1 before and won NaNoWriMo doing that. So I'm not super worried. I just wish I would have thought a little bit more in advance and picked a project like a week ago. But then again, I'm bad at making decisions, so here we are. That said though, like I mentioned, I am currently working on a Reedsy short story. It has to be turned in by the end of the day tomorrow on the 2nd. So the first couple of days of Preptober, I am going to be mostly focusing on that because I need to finish it and edit it and get it posted. But after that, full force ahead on Preptober. And I guess my secondary goal for the first couple of days is gonna be to look at my projects and make a decision. I don't know if 2 days is enough to make a decision, but we're gonna try. So it is currently the next day, and I was just working on my Reedsy story and had some thoughts that I wanted to get out in video form. So one unexpected benefit of writing these short stories and submitting them on Reedsy is that I'm very quickly getting a bit of a clearer sense of some of my weaknesses as a writer, because just the process of coming up with a new short story every week or every 2 weeks kind of exposes like the way your mind formulates stories, as opposed to writing a novel or having several novel projects going where you're not really adding new novel projects to the mix very often. You just have ones that you've been working with for a while. And constantly trying to formulate new ideas, it's kind of exposed a little bit where my rut is or my comfort zone is as a writer. I'm having such a difficult time explaining this, but I think it all just boils down to when I write, I find it hard to have any sort of variety in character voice, and therefore everything sounds the same and everything sounds like me when it should sound like the character, which kind of has just led to all of the main characters and all of these short stories I've written being just kind of like the same person, even if they weren't really intended to be. I feel like I just have difficulty getting out of my own mind and writing in the style of someone else's thoughts and someone else's words and translating that into the actual text and the dialogue. So across projects, a lot of things tend to sound the same or just like me. Fortunately, in the Preptober sense, both of the stories that I'm considering working on have characters who are very, very different from me. So hopefully either project that I choose to work on will kind of expand my mind in that way. But I'm kind of worried that even if I write from a perspective that is very different from mine, it will still end up sounding like me. And I'm not sure what to do about that except just write it and try to figure it out, because it's kind of one of those intangible things. So that's it for now. I just wanted to get those thoughts out of my head and into video form, and I'm gonna go back to writing now so I can hopefully finish this story and then get on to Preptober stuff. So it is now a few days into the month and I'm back with another update. Firstly, I did complete and post my short story on Reedsy, and I will go ahead and link that directly down in the description if you'd like to check it out. This week's prompts were all about the past, and the one that I chose to write on was to write about someone who either goes to or purposely avoids their high school reunion. Now on to Preptober stuff. So I posted the story kind of near the end of the day on the 2nd, and my goal was after posting it to jump into trying to figure out which story to work on for Preptober, but I honestly didn't really ever get to the point of needing to make a decision because one of the two projects has been really, really calling my name and I just haven't been able to get it out of my mind. So I think that's the one that I'm going to work on, and that is my new project, the one that I'm starting pretty much basically from scratch. I think I'm equally excited and nervous about working on this project because not only is it something that needs a ton of work, there's a lot of prep that's going to need to go into this for me to be able to write it in November, but also there are just so many things about this project that are new things that I've never done before. Pretty much every project I've worked on over the past few years and have talked about on my channel is something that I had an idea for in a very basic form a long time ago, and that I kind of updated and made more complex and something that could be an actual novel. So they're all things where I've had the initial spark and initial idea for a really long time. I've just done a lot of development to make them more interesting and more complex. And for all those stories, they already had some semblance of a plot or characters or something. But this is a completely fresh idea. I'm working from scratch, I'm building from scratch, and that's something that I really haven't done in a very long time. On top of that, the characters that I've started to develop for the story are very different from a lot of the characters I've written in the past. I don't want to list absolutely everything about the story, but pretty much everything about working on this project is gonna be vastly different from anything I've ever worked on. And on top of that, I'm developing all of this within a specific time frame and a not very big time frame, which again is something I haven't done. So this is just gonna be an entirely new experience all around, and I'm not sure if I'm excited or nervous for that aspect. But this idea has been really calling to me, and I really, really like the direction it's going, so hopefully that inspiration and motivation is gonna just keep pushing me forward to get it created and get it done. So I picked a project, I know what direction I'm headed in now, and I think the most important thing to be able to actually get all this stuff done in Preptober is to create a pretty tangible as I can create, list of goals for the month. So I created a list of goals, which I'm gonna run through. There are some that I'm gonna leave out because they're a little bit too specific to the content of the story and I don't wanna talk about all that on here. But as I jump into this list of goals, I am gonna talk a little bit about the broad general strokes of the story as well. So firstly, I've got a couple of craft books that I want to finish in October. The first one is The Anatomy of Story, which I've been working on for quite a while now. I'm a bit over halfway through and I've been taking notes on it. I think I have like 5 chapters left, so this shouldn't be too hard to get through. And then after that, I want to jump into on writing, but just the part that is actually craft advice rather than the first half, which is just kind of an autobiography. And then I have one more book I want to read in October, which is going to lead me into the story that I'm writing, and that is to reread If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. My project is a dark academia. I feel like it was inevitable. I've been obsessing over dark academia stories for 3 years. Obviously, it was gonna work its way into my writing at some point, and here it is. Obviously, my point in rereading If We Were Villains is not to recreate it in my own story or to write a story that's exactly like it, but rather just more of a mood, a vibe, a tone inspiration. Like firstly, just to get me in the correct mood to write a story like this. And I think that a really important aspect of dark academia as a genre is nailing that mood and tone, and it's something that I don't feel super confident in. And If We Were Villains is still my favorite dark academia novel I've ever read, so in rereading it, I really want to pay attention to what I think the novel did really well in terms of setting that tone and mood, and how I can take inspiration from that to set my own tone and mood that I'm looking for in my story, if that makes sense. So now let's actually jump into the goals for Preptober. So the first thing I need to do in Preptober is nail down my characters. I have a few that I've already kind of figured out, but there are several that are just kind of a little ambiguous, and I need to lock everything down and get them all set in stone. Then after that, and this is where things get really wonky from how I usually do things, I have to pick my main character. I'm developing these characters without knowing who the main character is yet. I have a couple that I'm leaning toward, but I just don't know. Next up is I need to figure out how I want to structure the story, which is kind of a twofold problem. Firstly, I just have to figure out like generally what story structure I want to use. In the past, the one that I've typically looked at is Save the Cat, but I'm not sure that's gonna work super well for this one, so I need to do some research. I need to dabble in some ideas and figure something out. Secondly is the fact that I kind of want to tell this story non-linearly, but I'm not sure how to do it. So that's the other thing I have to figure out is, do I want to do that? And if so, how do I logistically do that? Next up is that I need to create a story Bible. I always do character profiles for any major characters in my stories. In fact, I have like stupidly long character surveys for pretty much any character in any story I've worked on recently, but I've never explicitly created like a specific story Bible, and I want to do that this time. And then the rest of this list of Preptober goals is where it gets a little bit vague and general because I just haven't gotten to the point where I can be more specific with them. So the rest of the things on this list are things like flesh out the setting, figure out the character relationships, the general story arc, detailed outline, stuff like that that are just kind of basic writing things that I just haven't gotten to the point where I can be more specific with those goals, but I needed to break it down in some way rather than just saying outline the story. But I will create more detailed goals once I get there. I just need to get through this first stuff before I can get there. So obviously I've got a lot on my plate this month. So I think that's where I'm gonna end this vlog. it seems like a decent place to end because I figured out my project, I figured out my goals, and now I need to execute those. As far as the rest of Preptober, I don't plan to vlog it just because that's added work on top of all the stuff I've just talked about. I don't want to add more stuff to my plate, so I think this is going to be it. But I might make some sort of video at the end of the month kind of talking about what I did, what worked, what didn't work, stuff like that. I'm also not planning on vlogging NaNoWriMo this year just because, again, added work that I don't need. But last year I wasn't planning on vlogging either, and it just didn't feel like NaNoWriMo without the vlog, so we'll see. But as of right now, I'm not planning on vlogging that. I just want to be creative and write and be inspired and get a lot of work done, and I don't want to have to worry about recording all of it when I really don't have time for that. So that is it for this vlog. Let me know down in the comments if you are also participating in Preptober and NaNoWriMo. Honestly, I can't remember if I always link my NaNoWriMo profile down in the description, but I definitely will for this one. And also, links to all my other social media will also be down in the description, especially Twitter and Goodreads, because that's where I'm most active. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I'd love to be friends with all of you on there. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!